So, again, thank you so much for coming in, Janey. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. I've not seen you for so long.
No, you've never been here.
Totally bizarre. I know, I can't believe I've
Yeah.
not been here. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
So you've had an extraordinarily diverse career, as we all have, just sitting at the table over there, talking to Emma, which I did not realise that I worked with Emma when she was in the film industry as a film PR. I mean, we all reinvent ourselves a lot these days, and that's so good and healthy, and I love it. And you know, I'm still reinventing myself even at my age. So it's so you've got quite a story. So let's start, because you started as a singer, didn't you?
Yeah, so I was a singer first. Yeah, I mean,
You're a rock and roll chick. Well, yeah, I've
yeah.
seen pictures of you.
Yeah.
You're in it, and your blonde hair. And
Yeah, so I started off in bands and kind of little covers bands and things like that. And then my first gig was with Mary Wilson and the Wilsations. So does anybody remember the lady with the beehive?
Yeah.
It was fantastic fun because there was she just had Just What I Always Wanted, the first hit. The first hit, and so there were kind of like 11 of us, 12 of us going around in a minibus, you know, practically no money, but it was hilarious. So we did lots of gigs with Mary. And then she fired me because I wouldn't cut my hair and dye it chicken yellow or something, whatever she wanted. And I was devastated. She wanted a certain look for the band, and I didn't fit the look, and I just didn't want to. I had really long hair, it was naturally blonde, and I just didn't want to cut it really short and dye it chicken yellow. So she fired me.
So was this then?
Devastated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, honestly, I remember being just absolutely heartbroken. Like, am I mad? I'm choosing my hair. I was like, oh. And then the only funny thing that came out of that was that the Sun newspaper, did a piece called "Too Hairy for Married." I claim to fame of being the Sun. And then, but actually, good came out of it because I was kind of desperate for a gig. And then one of the guys in the band who obviously all the guys in the band felt really bad about it. Oh, by the way, I'm completely great friends with Mary, by the way. In fact, I've worked with her since, so there's no bad feeling. There's no bad feeling. But one of the guys in the band who felt really sorry for me said, actually, do you know what? I know a guy who's doing the tour managing for Wham, and they're this brand new boy band. So do you want to? Shall I put you forward? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so that's how I got the gig. So, and that came about because I auditioned. I rang up and I got an audition, and literally it was right at the very beginning. So George and Andy were putting together their first tour, and they had a kind of musical director just auditioning different people for them to start with before they came in.
You were obviously neither Pepsi or
no, because they weren't actually the singers; they were the kind of dancers on the when we got to the gig. But so we had the contrary. But yeah, so they had a few session musicians that were auditioning, and then they were auditioning for backing singers. So I went along, did an audition, and this musical director said to me, you know, I think you sound great and everything, but the truth of it is that I think the guys are looking for a section, like what they call a vocal section. So 3 singers who are already kind of working together. If truth be told, I think that's what they're looking for. And we've got Kokomo coming later. So you've probably heard of them, like really big time kind of vocal section that work with all the big American bands, you know. So I went away and I thought, I'm not having that. So I rang a couple of singers that I'd worked with on sessions, and I said,
how old are you then, by the way?
Oh, God, I don't know, probably 20, 21, something like that. So I rang up a couple of friends, a guy who I knew from who in Light of the World, G, and a friend of mine, Janey, who I'd done odd sessions with, and I said, do you reckon we can pull it off and say we're a vocal session? And they said, yeah. So we just rehearsed by phone, you know, like singing down the landline, didn't have phones obviously, singing a few Wham things down the landline, doing some harmonies, and then I rang him back and I said, I don't know what's the matter with you. I forgot to tell you that I've been working as part of a section for ages. Can we come down? I was like, yeah, okay. And that's how we got the gig.
So how long were you on the road singing?
So with Wham I did all of their tours.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so everything, including China, which was when we were the very first Western band to play
I remember.
China. That really was an experience because it was before all the changes in China.
Yeah.
So it was really just the most bizarre experience.
But yeah, talking about Buddhism at our table, because I practice Buddhism and Pepsi is a Buddhist.
Yeah.
And George's PR, Connie Filipello, is a Buddhist.
Yeah, that's
We're all
right.
everywhere. And there are not that many of us that actually practice this particular Buddhism, but we do get around. There was quite a Buddhist thing going on there, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
And so you've got 3 children? 4 children. You started having children at some point, presumably.
Very late. Yeah.
So you didn't go during then. So did you go from music into presenting?
Yeah, so I did, so after I'd done the kind of backing singing stuff, while I was still doing session singing, we have to mention my hit, because that was 5 minutes of fame.
I didn't know you had a hit.
Yeah, 5 minutes of fame, love, don't forget that. So, you do remember.
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Early 90s. I did a session. I literally did a session for Saint Etienne, and then that track turned out to sort of a long story, but actually it's a very quick story in that DJs sampled the track, and one guy bootlegged it and sold of course it was vinyl then, off the back of his car. So all of a sudden all the record companies really wanted the track. So it was the fastest thing I've ever seen happen in the music industry. Like I went and did a session. It took me about 7 Ways to Love. So it took me like 2 hours to get there, about 20 minutes to do the recording, because it's only 4 words, right? And 2 hours to get that.
What's any other words?
7 Ways to Love, that's it. So that it was a rave track, right? So then 2 hours to get back on the train, and then I get this phone call saying, about a week later, saying, saying it's been bootlegged, and so we've got record companies who really, really want it. So do you want to, as you're singing it, do you want to front it? So I'm like, yeah, okay. And literally within 7 weeks, we were number 8 in the charts and on top of the pops. I've never known anything move that fast. It's because the record companies were panicking that kind of the DJ's making the money, right? So yeah, so that was literally my kind of 5 minutes of fame, and it was a bit like, what the hell is happening here? But meanwhile, I just started presenting on the radio.
Oh, that's fantastic. And did you start with Steve Wright from the beginning?
No. I started at what is now BBC London. Back then, it's called GLR. It was they were great days at GLR actually. Chris Evans was there at the time, and a lot of the that was his first gig.
Because she was at.
Yes, she was, and Vanessa Feltz, of course.
So she interviewed me.
And Richard Skinner and Danny Baker and a lot of the kind of radio.
Robert Elms.
Robert Elms, a lot of those kind of so that's where I kind of started doing radio. I just had my own weekly show, which was called The Gospel Show, which was gospel music. So that was where I started, and then after that, I went to Virgin Radio, which I absolutely loved, which was great fun. So I was at Virgin for 6 years. So again, Chris Evans again. And so that was really fun. And then from there, I went to Radio 2.
You were on Radio 2 for a long time.
So yeah, I had my own show, which was very, very early on a Saturday morning to start with. And then I met Steve at a party, and someone said that he was going to be doing afternoons on Radio 2. So I remember going up to him and saying, if you need like anybody in your team, I think you should pick me. He's laughed about this so many times. The fact that I just said, I think you should pick me. I think I'll be good for it, you know. And he went, all right then.
Now, what gives you this confidence? Because you haven't changed. Because you were just telling us before dinner that you're going to be speaking at the Russell Brand event. That
I haven't even told anybody yet.
This is a scoop. If anybody's going to the Russell Brand Festival,
it's only a little gig. I mean, I'm not exactly alongside Wim Hof or anything, but even so.
Yes. But you know, so you've got this amazing confidence.
Well, that's not strictly true. It's actually only when I'm really, really sure about something. When I'm really, really sure, I kind of have a determination that I have to manifest it and make it happen. But it's not with everything. It's not a confidence around everything at all. But when there's something I'm really know is right for me, I'll go after it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I know that one.
So that I got that gig, and yeah, 24 years. And I only realised it's that long because I knew I'd only
24 years,
just had a
and
baby.
Steve Wright in the afternoon.
24 years, 24 and a half actually. Yeah, till
Right.
last September.
Until last September, and all changed at Radio 2.
Yeah.
So, but long before you stopped broadcasting, you started doing your own thing, which is really what we're here to talk about tonight.
Yeah.
Because when we first met, you were already working on the sort of natural health, well-being, being a spokesperson, writing books, doing your awards. So how did all that start? How did you come into all that?
So I think that started, I'd always been, well, not always, but for a long time I've been interested in sort of natural health and well-being and mindset and kind of sustainability stuff. I think actually I was a bit ahead of my time, is the truth of it, as you were.
Yeah.
You know, I sometimes joke and say, you know, I literally was talking about, you know, kale and coconut oil before they got their own publicists. You know?
Before they had a brand.
I was seriously ahead of my time.
And what got you into it all? Because your children went to Steiner schools, I know that.
Yeah, so it was really when I got pregnant with my first child that it really kicked in. I was already interested in a lot of stuff, but then I never planned to have any children. I mean, I really did not. I really did not. did not have a biological clock ticking. I actually had no interest at all.
And then you got
I was just a singer and a presenter, yeah. And then I found out I was pregnant, and they thought it was an ovarian cyst. So I went to kind of have a scan to see how bad this cyst was, and it turned out to be a baby. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh God, I want this baby. So I
had another one, and another
steep learning curve. What the hell do you do with a baby anyway? I had no idea. I'd never even considered it. So suddenly, it felt massively important for me to be as healthy as I could, you know, and it really was a massive learning curve. I remember sending my partner off to the Hale Clinic in London,
I remember the Hale.
and said to him, come back with something I can read about this, you know. So bless him, he bought me about 30 books.
Great books are the basement of the Hale.
Yeah, exactly. He bought me about 30 books about natural childbirth and parenting and everything. And that's really where what kicked everything off. I suddenly realised, okay, actually everything has to change. Everything, you know, so I had to find somewhere where I could, if I wanted to highlight my hair, I wanted to do it with organic, you know, no chemicals, I mean everything. So it was quite a steep learning curve. And then I wrote my first book in 2006. And that came about because a publisher heard me talking about the stuff on the radio. So all those years I was chipping in, and of course the guys used to take the mickey and like pull the mic down. Oh, there she goes again, you know, cosmic bird. She's off on one talking about eco balls and you know,
organic food.
Yeah, and she's, you know, knitting with yogurt again. You know. So they would completely take the mick. But I used to get a lot of emails or you know, messages from people who said, actually, you know, I think it's really interesting, and is there really a natural deodorant that works? Or you know, so I used to get a lot of calls, and then a publisher came to me and said, have you thought about writing a book? And I said,
what was the first book? Was that Imperfectly Perfect?
Yeah, Imperfectly Natural Woman.
Perfectly Natural Woman.
And I said, no, don't be silly, of course I haven't. And she said, well, you know, you obviously are really passionate about this stuff, so why don't you? So that's how the first book came about. And then the book, as anyone will know who's written a book, certainly back then, just because a book comes out doesn't mean it does anything, right? And back in those days, bookshops were really important. And
pre-Amazon, in fact.
Oh, yeah, well, Amazon was around, but we still kind of really wanted the bookshops. Yeah. But I remember thinking it was like having another baby, you know, delivering this book. It was literally like my life's work, and it was nowhere to be found, like nowhere. I was furious, I absolutely incensed, and the publisher was just saying, well, you know, we tried, and you know, Waterstones don't want it, and Amazon, you know, like nobody, you know, and it was just like, what the hell? Like, what have I done all of this for? So I was furious. So I had one of those this ain't going to happen moments, and got myself an interview on Johnny Walker's show, and we chatted for 45 minutes, and the book went to #1 on Amazon overnight. And then all of a sudden the Waterstones were like, well, could we have 300 copies? And the publisher, excuse me, I called you 3 days ago, you weren't interested. So that was interesting.
Value of PR.
Yeah, exactly. So the book was yeah, you know, it was big. It was really big for its time. So yeah, that's kind of what kickstarted it.
Yeah.
And then that kickstarted the website and the recommending natural products. I never ever went into retail. I never tried to sell anything, although everyone told me over the years, you know, we should have your own range and have your own this range and that range. But I can't do that really because I'm really enthusiastic about so many different products. I couldn't just promote my own. So.
Not tempted.
No.
So from doing the book, you then created your awards.
Yeah, so that came about really because what I was really doing was just recommending natural products and services and eco products, as well as therapists. I can never do the one thing. I have to do the everything because everything matters. You know,
yes,
I can't.
Holistic.
I used to find it really hard when people hired me to do a talk on, you know, natural skincare, which is probably what I was best known for. Because you can't really talk about natural skincare unless you're also looking at what you wash your clothes in and you know what you spray. You have to look at the holistic picture. So so that's how the website, the recommendations site came about, Imperfectly Natural. And then I realised that a lot of the brands that I was promoting, many of them were really small, and you know, it's often one woman in her kitchen who had eczema and, you know, made her own cream, you know, and I love getting behind those kind of brands. So I thought, let's put together a kind of an awards package where I can do a bit of promo for these people, and it puts them on the map without it just being conventional PR. You know, it's just another way of getting them to be able to say, actually, you know what, I've entered these awards, vote for me, and it's been going ages now. And yeah, I love it because you still come across new brands all the time, as well as the big ones, you know, the leaders and
then you teach.
brands.
You also teach entrepreneurs. So I imagine predominantly women how to be the brand. They are the brand. There's a lot of work you do with them, teaching them confidence. I mean, if much anything else, they learnt your confidence, it'd be halfway there, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the main things about that is helping. You see, I've worked with an awful lot of therapists and practitioners, and the line I hear a lot is, oh, but it's not about me, you know, it's about Reiki, or it's about reflexology, it's not about me, don't look at me. Actually, the reality is, you are the brand, we have to look at you. There's millions of Reiki practitioners or whatever it is, but there's only one you. That's the message I try and get across. And then, of course, everyone gets into their, oh yeah, but you know, I don't really want my picture. And but it's not about, it's not, I say, it's not showing off, it's showing up. It's just letting people connect with you so that they know who you are, so they can see if they like your energy. So yeah, I love doing that kind of work.
It is women that have a particular issue
absolutely
showing up and being heard and being seen. I know, because so many women that I've worked with over the years, and it's something we have to support each other to really get beyond that.
Totally, and I think when they can spin it and recognise, well, the more I can connect with people, the more it's that people do business with those they like, know and trust thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, when they recognise, the more I can connect with people, the more impact I can have, which is why they're doing what they do in the first place.
Exactly. And now the sober clubs, which I don't really know a lot about at all, apart from its name. So
that came about. So let me see. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think back to the kind of process of that. So I was never someone who was at rock bottom. I wasn't, you know, in a skip pouring vodka on my cornflakes or anything like that. But I was just a typical, really quite typical woman who drank a lot, you know. And then when I had my kids, as my kids were through those years, those real frantic years, you know, I think a lot of parents get into that mummy wine culture thing where it's like, oh, thank God I've got an hour off, somebody else can deal with them and I can take care of myself. And for me, the concept of self-care meant going and having a large Sauvignon, you know, somewhere. So I just got into that habit. And then, you know, as most people know, the habit ramps up, you know, if you don't have an off switch. And I didn't have an off switch. So I think it was, I mean, it was absolutely years before I kind of really even realised that there was something that wasn't great here. Because my perception was that, and I think actually it's the perception in the UK, really, is that there are two types of people. There are those who are sadly clinically dependent, at rock bottom, really need support and alcohol services and all the rest of it. And then there's absolutely everybody else, and everybody else are completely happy and everything's good and they love drinking and they have fun and everything's fantastic. Every now and then they just can't hold their beer, but mostly everything's good, right? And that was my perception. So suddenly I was recognising that I was waking up at 3 a.m. feeling not great and thinking, this is a bit weird. This is actually not okay, because I'm talking about holistic living and not putting too much crap in your body and, you know, being authentic and all of this stuff. But there's this bloody great big elephant in the room that I'm stepping around. This is not right. So I'll stop, I thought, you know, at 3 a.m. And then the next day, you know, come 6 p.m, the wine which is in my ear again, it's, oh, well, you know, just have one, you know, you can stop tomorrow, you know, because you're the kind of person that can do what you want, and you're pretty strong, so you don't have a problem. And then it would all start again. And that went on for years because...
Do you think it was because of coming from a rock and roll background in a way?
Well, not really, because everyone else seemed to do it, but nobody else seemed to have an issue with it. Of course, I now realise that millions of people are waking up at 3 a.m. hating themselves. They just think there's nobody else waking up at 3 a.m, right? So I had no idea there was another way. I knew I didn't fit any kind of profile of needing alcohol services. I never even missed a day off work, ever, you know. So I didn't know where I fitted. I had no idea that there was this other. I now know we call the term grey area drinkers, because it's not black or white, you know, it's somewhere in between. So this went on for ages. I remember once going to see a GP about, I think it was a vitamin D test or something, and she was really friendly, and I was just chatting to her, and it's that doorknob moment, you know, on the way out, and then you go, oh, there's one more thing. And I said to her, actually, there's one more thing. I'm a little bit worried I might be drinking too much. And she went, oh, well, you seem fine, you know, how much are you drinking? And obviously I lied, I mean, everyone lied, why would you not lie? So I said, well, you know, 2 glasses, sometimes 3, you know. And she went, oh, I said, nothing. Just have an alcohol-free day. You know? I mean, like I hadn't thought of that, right? So I kind of left there thinking, oh, thank God, everything's fine. And that kept me stuck for another couple of years. You know, along with various articles coming out, like there was one the other day in The Guardian. Oh, people who drink wine are more likely to live longer than people who don't. No, sorry, absolute BS. You know, I know that now. But at the time, it was like, oh, okay, that's good then. I missed the small print that said, you know, in moderation. But this
I
went
just
on
want to
for
bring
years.
up that obviously there's nothing wrong in having a glass of wine.
Absolutely.
It depends
But-
if you've
but-
got your off switch going.
100%. But I genuinely do not believe now, but I used to believe, that it's good for you. I don't believe it's good for you. I believe it's perfectly fine to make your choice, and I don't have any issue with that. Coffee's not good for me, but I'm choosing to have it.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fine. But I've got an off switch. I won't be having 4 coffees and waking up hating myself.
Actually, I haven't thought about that, because I would never have a coffee this time of night.
Yeah.
But there you
But
go.
there
I
you
would
go.
have a glass of wine. So
There you go.
You've got to know your own.
It's the question I always use is, it's not a case of am I drinking too much,
No.
should I stop drinking, it's nothing like that. The question, there's only one question to ask yourself, and that is, could my life be better physically and emotionally without alcohol? Now, if someone had asked me back then, oh God, yeah, of course it would. I just don't know, I just don't seem to be able to stop.
I think one of the things that, for me anyway, that's come up as I've got older is knowing what suits my well-being and my health. And I know that if I can sit with friends and go through, you know, have maybe a couple, 2, 3 glasses of wine, but it will start to feel unpleasant in my body, as you say, that 3 o'clock in the morning. But there's other things. There's so many things I'm now aware of do not suit my body.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, wheat does not suit my body. Sugar doesn't really suit my body. Dairy doesn't. Anyway, I won't go into all that. I've just come back from a detox. Sorry. But anyway, it's like it's really sort of honouring ourselves,
It really
honouring
is.
our
Yeah,
bodies, and
it is.
self-nurturing, self-respect, and saying, well, just become aware. I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
I think it's a case of if there's something that is starting to control you, that's when it's time to have a look at it.
Chocolate controls.
You know, because usually we're trying to fill some kind of hole, aren't we? Really.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I did a TEDx talk called "Sobriety Rocks Who Knew," and then after that realised that actually there were lots of people who were going through a similar thing, and I wanted to make it all completely positive. So I don't do any. There's no judgment of anything. I just want people to focus on well-being for them. So so I thought, well, if I create a community where we're focused completely on well-being, but people have the space to be able to be open about the fact that they're sober curious or whatever. It might work. And
quite interestingly, I think there's also the way that society has changed. That when I've gone through phases when I haven't touched alcohol for a couple of years, then I'll drink again. And as a PR in the fashion industry, which I was for many years, there was always a lot of champagne sloshing around. You only got to watch Ad Fab to see what it was like. And I would not want a glass and turn it down. People would really try and force you to have it. I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. There's a much more open attitude. If you want a glass of wine, have a glass of wine. If you want to stay on water all night, stay on water all night. And I think that's kind of important. Whereas there was a lot of judgment in the late 80s, early 90s from people that wanted to stop drinking socially and were actually criticised for it.
I think there is still there's still some sober shaming goes on. There is. There really is. And one of the issues, well, it was the whole thing with the footballer the other day, wasn't there? Jack Grealish, who celebrated the win, the football win, by getting so drunk that he had to put him in a wheelchair for a bit or something. And you can just imagine that kind of, because it's that thing of, we need alcohol for celebrations and commiserations and all the rest of it.
Well, of course, Boris Johnson's certainly going through
well, there you go.
to mention that this week.
Exactly.
The celebrations.
Exactly.
Apparently, every Friday night they would have a celebration in the press office at number 10, right the way through COVID.
Yeah.
Well, not celebration, but a kind of have a drink at the end of the week. It's been a tough week for them. And
but the idea that in order to connect and be social, it has to be alcohol is utterly ridiculous.
I think
that's what needs to change.
That's the important
So
thing.
what has changed since the days you were talking about is that now there is a massive choice of fantastic drinks that are alcohol-free. There wasn't even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But when I stopped drinking 5.5 years ago, it was right at the start of this incredible, huge rise in the choice of alcohol-free drinks. So the expression that I use all the time is keep the ritual, change the ingredients. So if you're going to go and meet with friends or whatever, absolutely open a bottle, absolutely chink a glass, because why should glasses be called after what goes in them? I mean, I like a wine glass. Well, if it's got sparkling water in it, why call it a wine glass? But the point is now we can have something else in it if we choose to. And the choice of alcohol-free drinks is fantastic. And in fact, a lot of the producers have found that they're, like Heineken, I remember reading, their 0% beer grew exponentially more than the regular stuff in a period of time.
I think the most important thing is choice, but of course a lot of people have been affected from lockdown because there they were kept in their houses.
That was very interesting. I mean, interestingly, that went two ways. So I had a lot of clients who had been sober for a while and they'd been doing really, really well, and then it literally knocked them for six. I had met other people who realised quite quickly what was going to happen if they went down that route. Because it's addictive. It's not only about what you're choosing, it's the fact that it is addictive.
It can be dangerous. I mean, people were locked up in their house with their family, drinking too much, then there would be abuse, then there would be... It would get exaggerated. It's not been pleasant. Then, of course, mental health issues that have come up.
100%. And, let's close gyms, but leave off licenses open.
Yeah.
So don't get me started anyway.
No, I agree. I mean, it's been it is still, one looks at the world as it is today and what's going on. I mean, awful thing that happened to those kids in Nottingham, and it's a crazy world. But we have to be aware, and we have to nurture ourselves. We have to be aware what works for me, what works for me.
Yeah, exactly. I think it really is about finding a way to come back to balance for yourself.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think often women find that really hard because we often go through phases where we just put everyone else first. You know, I sometimes do these kind of like vision board sessions with people and with women, and the most common thing is we'll sort of say, let's have a think about what is it that you want for you. And sometimes there'll be a silence, and then sometimes someone will just burst into tears because they haven't actually considered what they want for themselves.
Oh, I've never had that because I've been
For
doing vision
years.
board sessions for years.
Yeah.
And I've never, but some people have to. I remember what happened. I have one of the questions I asked in my early retreats was what was the your highest moment of success in your life?
Yeah.
And that's when I first asked that. Several women would burst into tears and say, "I've never done anything that's successful." When I talk them through it, their families.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's always so many things that we do and don't take ourselves seriously for, which is quite important, or very important, I think.
Yeah.
So I'd like to open it up now to everybody and see if there's some questions here for you, particularly, and then we'll go back into conversation. Does anybody like to ask Janey anything specific about what she's had to say? Well-being.
I'd like to hear what aspect of your multi-dimensional career you most enjoyed, felt that was really you, and you felt most alive.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer it though, because really it is a everything louder than everything else kind of answer. There isn't one thing that I enjoyed most. I mean, obviously, singing with Wham was amazing. You know, obviously, but so has been on radio too, and yeah. Sorry, I just can't answer that because it's like lots of
You've had an amazing life.
yeah, there's been so many. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like you're doing the right thing at the right time. You were following the flow in each moment.
Yeah.
Really.
I think so. I mean, I think for me, I just really like to have lots of things going on. I like that kind of versatility. So I suppose I'm really grateful. If I look back, I'm really grateful that I got that first book out. If I hadn't have had the success I had with that first book, I wouldn't have done any of the other things I've done. So I suppose
if you
that
take it
was
back even further, if you hadn't been talking about what you were interested in on your
on
radio,
the radio,
show,
I wouldn't have
then
got
you
the
wouldn't
book.
have got the first book. So
That's true.
there's this. I mean, I can see it in my own life. And I'm sure we can all see it in our lives. There's a
Just
kind
kind of
of
markers.
there's a journey.
Yeah.
There's a journey, and then it's about making the decisions at the different times.
Yeah.
You know, the right decisions.
It's true.
Sometimes
But
the wrong decisions.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm grateful that that book was a success because then that led to another whole career of doing what I probably love best, which is trying to plant seeds, you know, in seed help, but trying to plant seeds so that it just sparks ideas for other people about, oh, do you know what, maybe I will try something natural, or maybe I will change my mindset.
We haven't talked about family constellation work, which is another big love of yours. Do you all know about family constellation work? Do you want to explain?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to explain, unfortunately.
Has anybody done any family constellation work?
No.
Oh, well, it's impossible to explain.
Yeah,
then.
it is impossible. I mean, just very briefly, just to say that I was a participant in family constellations about, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something like
tell
that.
me about it then.
I would have done, because it's the single most powerful and effective therapeutic, in inverted commas, thing I've ever done, and I've done lots because of the work I do. I've had I've been lucky enough to be able to try lots and lots and lots of things, so I'm kind of clued in on most things and how they work. But nothing is as powerful as family constellations, in my opinion, for anyone who has any stuff, any baggage, any limiting beliefs. I mean, who doesn't really? So family constellations is usually done in a workshop setting. It was devised by a German psychotherapist called Bert Hellinger, and it's based on Gestalt, so they call it a whole piece of work. So it's got nothing really to do with your well, it is to do with your family, but you certainly don't come with your family, and it's
I
nothing to do
was
with
the same
stars.
going with my
So,
daughter, actually.
in fact, the name is wrong. It shouldn't really be called family constellations at all. But anyway, the idea is that you look at your family of origin. If you're doing traditional family constellations, there are other ways of doing it with business stuff, systemic constellations, which is also amazing. I do some of that as well. But for family constellations, you would typically present with something that's going on in your life. And then typically we would look at your family of origin. So we'd look at your, I mean, most people have heard of epigenetics now, and you know, the whole concept of inherited trauma. You know, the fact that, I mean, one interesting factoid that I hadn't realised is that we're all born from an egg in our grandmother's womb.
Yeah.
Right.
There's been a lot of
You
talk.
know,
Have you all heard about
it's,
that recently?
Yeah, so it's
Our
the
maternal
thing, isn't it?
grandmothers.
Yeah, our maternal grandmother's womb. We were born from that egg. So it's impossible to say, you know, I'm nothing to do with my family. They're nothing to do with me. You may be carrying something, you know, some trauma from ancestors from way back, which you don't know about, and that can show up in constellations, as well as the other use of the word carrying, because children often try to carry things for their parents. So it's a massive topic, and it is too big to describe.
And just to, we've actually had one of the local therapists did some sessions here once, but she said it was too distracting here, too much going on.
Oh, really?
Energetically to
So
do
what
it.
would you actually do in a session then? What kind
So
of things
you
do?
would. So the way I work is that we would have a whole group of people. So people do it differently. Sometimes people hold a workshop and they ask people to pre-book to do their issue, as it's called, to do their piece of work. But I don't do it like that. I work with another guy who's a trauma expert, and we decide to let the energy choose who does the issue, and if someone feels led to do it, they do.
It's a kind. If I can explain without, I'm not a teacher. You are.
Yeah, please do.
Different people in the room. The therapist kind of brings them into it, and they become aspects.
They represent. Yeah.
They represent They represent perhaps either your family members or people in your in your ancestors, or people in other generations of your family, and they somehow take on these roles, and an energy goes through the room where they become.
Therapist takes on the role. Sorry.
No.
You would take on the role.
So these people in the room,
People in the room.
you have a problem, you discuss it with the therapist. The therapist then brings in people around the room randomly to come in and start representing aspects of your trauma. It could be, say, your grandmother, it could be Second World War, it could be all these different things that had affected who you are today. And then there's a role-playing situation that happens, and it happens so, and I've been to quite a few sessions now, and it's become so extraordinarily natural, the way that the people that are taking on the roles become those people, become those situations, and well, anyway, it's almost impossible to explain.
It is difficult to explain.
Very
It's
powerful
just
work.
just to pick you up on
Very
one thing though,
powerful.
it's not role play in the sense that you don't have to act.
No,
Because that was when I first did it. I thought, oh my god, if I'm going to act, I want to be paid.
There's no performance.
You don't
There's no
even have to.
performance, yeah.
You do not have to. In fact, you don't really use your head at all. You literally drop
It
into your
kind of
body.
channels into the room.
It really does.
I mean, I was talking about issues I was having with my son at that point, and I was talking about my grandchildren, and all of them were from the ages of about 2 to 8 at that point. There were 5 of them, and I was asked to name the children, and then the teacher went round the room, and she chose people to represent all the different children, and these adults took on the mannerisms
Energy, yeah.
of the child.
Yeah.
So it was quite
Who they've never met.
Never
Yeah.
met.
It is-
never.
it is extraordinary.
So there was my oldest grandson Mordy, and then the person in the room that was Mordy would suddenly take his sort of way he stands, and it's very, very.
Wow.
It is amazing. There's
amazing work.
a Netflix series which is a bit cheesy, but it gives a bit of an impression, called Another Self. That
Another
shows
Self.
another self. That shows. I mean, it's not the best piece of work, but it shows constellations.
If we open up, it just goes to show really, if we as human beings and divine human beings really open up to what is potentially out there, You know, we can let in the most extraordinary, amazing energies that heal us, heal others.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It's almost impossible to put it into words because it's so powerful.
I wrote a piece on constellations after I'd had my own first experience. Because it completely healed my relationship with my mum. So I was hugely grateful for that, to have all those years with her before she died, just before Christmas. So I wrote an article for Spirit and Destiny magazine, and I wrote about my experience and about constellations. Anyway, I send it off to the editor. She sends it back, like all, you remember in the old days, red pen over everything. Right?
Yes.
She sends it back, says, but what do you mean the field?
What do you mean?
But then well, you know, I tried to explain. So what do you mean? Was it an actor playing your mum? No. And honestly, this thing went backwards and forwards. And
Because Joy wasn't a Daily Mail.
Yeah,
She wasn't going with my
exactly.
article with him this
And
week.
in the end, I just had to say, you know what, I kept trying to rewrite, and in the end I said, you know what, if you can't print it, I understand, but we're just going to have a line here that says, okay, so there's a bit of magic, be open, come and try it.
Do you know what
They printed it.
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, I was just say they printed it, and about 4 months later, a woman came and did a constellation. I wasn't teaching at that point; it was just a participant, and she was, bless her heart, just out of prison or something. And how she got the nerve to come and do this constellation, I'll never know. She'd found it within herself, and she said she'd read my article in a doctor's surgery. In the days when we used to be allowed magazines, remember that?
The days when we were in doctor's surgery.
Yeah, well, true. And she'd read this article and she just thought, you know what, I have to do it.
So I want to just suggest something. How many people would be interested if we could persuade Janey to come back and do a family constellation?
Oh God, okay.
Okay. All right. So I think
You
it would
have
be.
quite a few sessions to resolve things.
Well, it's a whole piece of work, so you would work on one aspect as an issue. So yes and no.
We could do a
some
day.
people
I've
do
been
that.
to things for a day, or
How
we
many
could do a
people
series.
can you actually
facilitate?
facilitate?
In one day, it depends, but I mean between 4 and 6. But the important thing to remember is that
Would you have more around the room though? You'd have about 20.
yeah, I mean, if you are a representative, then you are still very much involved. In fact, lots of people say that, I've had lots of people say, okay, I didn't do my issue, I'm glad I didn't do my issue. I didn't need to do my issue. I stood in the role of that representative and it has cleared everything. I've seen a completely new perspective. So it's not only about doing your piece of work, it's about being part in the room to represent. I mean, just to share one really interesting thing, I've just done a constellation for me, which I haven't done for ages. I've done my own issue. And it was so unbelievably powerful because we had a room of a relatively small number of people, and the issue was looking back at my parents. So this constellation was happening with these various representatives, but there were a couple of people in the room who weren't representatives, so they were just sitting around the edge. They hadn't been picked, if you see what I mean. So as this constellation is happening with the people in place, suddenly this guy was obviously getting very agitated, and he stood up and walked straight through the field, as we call it, straight through the field, walked out of the room. Now everyone assumed that it obviously triggered something in his own life. So one of the other people who were on the out went out after him to comfort him or whatever, and I was thinking to myself, oh, perhaps his mother had a similar thing or something like that. Anyway, he then came back in, sat down, seemed calm. A few minutes later, he did the same thing, and this time he walked through. I can't stand it. And he walked through, completely kind of interrupted the field of energy. Fascinating. And afterwards, when he came back, it hadn't triggered his own stuff at all. He'd just taken on so much anxiety that he literally couldn't stand it. Man, that was powerful. That was literally that anxiety that was held in my mum's field.
Amazing.
You know, my God.
How did you get him through that though? Because that's quite difficult.
The amazing thing with constellations, and this was amazing to me because I'm a really sensitive person and I get upset at absolutely everything, you know. Once the constellation's finished, it's finished. You obviously de-roll, of course you do. You say your own name, but you don't carry that any of it with you, because you've not been yourself, as it were. You've been in someone else's energy.
Yeah.
So the consultation, sorry, just so I'm clear, it's about an issue you have with a family member?
No, just something going on in your life. So somebody might typically, I mean, it might be that, but more typically you would rock up and say, you know, I can't seem to keep a partner, they leave me, or, you know,
or I have money issues. Or,
yeah, I mean, in my case,
I don't believe I deserve to earn
yeah, exactly.
money.
Or I, you know, I know I'm holding myself back or whatever. Or in my case, when I first rocked up, it was, you know, I don't feel like I'm a good enough mother. You know, but of course, it's never about that. Yeah, that was my issue. But what we end up looking at is never about what you've. I mean, but it is, of course.
And you can only pick one issue, can you?
Yes. Well, no, you don't pick your issue. You just say what it is you just say what it is you want to look at. You say what it is you want to look at, and then the field will determine how we do that work.
It is extraordinary. It just goes to show how much magic, if we call it magic, is out there. And because by it's opening up the empathy that we have and the connection.
But it's all very scientifically proven, of course. The inherited family trauma, epigenetics is all fully scientifically researched.
Yeah. So I mean, that room upstairs is very quiet. The big one.
Yeah, honestly, you know,
great for you to come back.
Yeah, I mean, the guy I like doing with this guy because he's been doing it for 30 years.
Right.
He's fantastic, and we work together really well. But he always says, you know, it doesn't matter what the interruptions are. It's meant to be. It's fine.
But anyway, it's quiet up there. But yes, we put her in that room. We have the kitchen open, but we've learned our lesson. But yes, no, I think that would be fascinating. So who else? Does anybody else like to ask another question about any other?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation, but I'd like to hear a bit more about your career in radio.
Yeah.
I'm a psychologist now, but 25 years ago when I was an undergraduate student, I had my own radio show on student radio.
Oh, cool.
And what really struck me then was what a male-dominated world it was. And I'm assuming it still is, to some extent. And I'm just really interested to hear how you navigated that as a woman. Did you have to be better than men? Did you have to play the game? What was your approach to have such a successful career in radio?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you know, there is a school of thought that says it wasn't that successful a career. I mean, I was never a mainstream, I was never, you know, a morning jock, you know. I mean, there are a few of those now, obviously, you know, Zoe Ball, and, you know, things are changing a bit. But yeah, I never, you know, I didn't have the daytime shows. I used to dep them a lot, you know, I used to get to dep Ken Bruce and all of that.
Sunday mornings you did sometimes.
And stuff, yeah. I mean, you're right, I think it probably still is. But
a lot of controllers are now women. I mean, there's a lot more women.
It was a women controller that when I first joined Radio 2, actually, when I had my early morning show. Yeah.
There's a lot more women in radio now doing very, very well. In fact, broadcasting and presenting generally. So many more women. It's interesting times.
It's true.
It's changed. It's changed.
Can I just ask one question about your writing, actually? When you wrote your first book, had you done any writing before?
No.
Or did you suddenly become a writer?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting one to me, because when the publisher asked me, I said, no, I'm not a writer. You know, I kind of probably did A-level English and that's it kind of thing, so I didn't consider myself a writer. But she said, you know, well, if you are passionate about something, just write it down, and, you know, words to the effect of, if it's crap, will help you, kind of thing. So she really gave me permission to just write how I speak, and that's what I did, really. And then I just, you know, over the years, I got a bit better at it, so so I didn't need quite as much editing. But I seem to remember the first book, I probably wrote twice the length of words I needed. I learnt that lesson. It was hideous trying to then edit it. But yeah, I mean, and I still believe that. I encourage, I mean, one of the things I do is help people birth a book. Because I think, actually, books are still an amazing calling card. It's incredible, actually, isn't it, really? When you think about it, that they are. You know, a lot of the brands, a lot of the people I work with, you know, they're doing all kinds of stuff to get their message out there. But actually, when you've got a book, it opens up much more opportunity to be interviewed, to have a reason to be featured. Because books are relatively cheap, and yet they're amazing, right? So, so I think if you have a message, then you can write a book. If you're a crap writer, well, just get a good editor.
Or a good photographer.
Yes. exactly, yeah.
Pictures.
Yeah, exactly, or just do a video version, yeah, exactly. I mean, things have opened up, haven't they?
I mean, the thing now is that if you can speak, you can write.
Exactly.
Because so many people are doing live broadcasts on social media.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people have found their voice, a lot of women, I have to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Which is great.
Exactly.
A lot of young women.
It's so much easier because it can all get captioned up for you.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Can I just say one other thing,
Yeah,
just really
please,
quickly?
yeah.
So my awards that we mentioned are actually open at the moment, my
Okay.
Platinum Awards. So if anyone has got a little, little or big, holistic brand or product or service, or they're a therapist or a coach or whatever, there's a whole load of different categories. There's different levels. It's not expensive, but there's lots of promo to be had. So it's just a nice way of getting holistic stuff a little bit of a push.
Anyway, so I want to thank you very
Thank
much.
you, I really
Janey.
appreciate
And don't
it.
forget Janey's books are over there as well.